everyone, and welcome back to Nine Talks Boxing. I just wanted to do a quick video. Well, it might not be that quick, but a video outlining the Saudi card that's on tomorrow, which is probably a card that a lot of British fans, including myself, are really looking forward to, which is going to be the 5v5 card between Queensberry and Matchroom Promotions. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So this is going to be my predictions for these fights. Some are harder to predict than others, but they're all quite good fights. So first of all, let's start with Craig Spider Richards versus Willie Hutchinson. Craig Spider Richards, I believe he's 18-3, and Willie Hutchinson, I don't remember his exact record, but I know he has one loss. He had to Lennox Clark, but that was at 168 in the point. Frank Warren is trying to make about this fight is because Willie Hutchinson, except for that singular fight or like one or two fights against other opponents, that singular fight against Lennox Clark, he was saying, he didn't look right at 168 pounds. So we're going to see here how much of that is true, because we know what Craig Spider Richards is going to do. We know what he's capable of. He's quite a rugged fighter, not got particularly a lot of skill, I'd argue, but he's very rugged, and he's been there with the best. Of course, he's been there with Bivol. Some people are saying that was a close fight. I completely disagree with that. I had it like 10 rounds to do, but he still gave a good effort himself against Bivol. I mean, we've seen what Bivol has done since, and he's been in with Joshua Buatsi as well, who's a pretty, well, we haven't seen what he's capable of at world level yet, but he's basically dusted out the British level, and Craig Richards didn't do too bad against Joshua Buatsi. So now this fight, I actually give Willie Hutchinson a better chance than a lot of people are. I know a lot of people are writing him off with that loss, but a lot of people need to remember he's not that bad technically, and Craig Spider Richards can be outboxed, and we saw Craig Spider Richards outboxed prior to getting stoppage against Shakan Pitters. And I mean, I don't know where Willie Hutchinson stacks up to next to Shakan Pitters, but if you're getting outboxed by Shakan Pitters, I'm not saying he's terrible, but a lot of people can probably outbox you. And that's something that interests me, and that's something that not a lot of people are realising about this fight because of what Craig Spider Richards has done at one level. But so I find this one fairly hard to predict, but I'm actually going to go for an upset, maybe, if you like, if you can call it an upset. I'm going to go for Willie Hutchinson in this one, and you're probably asking me why, and I'm giving you that reason, because while I'm not overly impressed by Willie Hutchinson, Craig Spider Richards is a pretty basic fighter, and if you're good enough, there's clearly a reason why Frank's putting Willie Hutchinson instead of someone else. If you're good enough, then you will beat Craig Spider Richards. So I'm going for Willie Hutchinson by points. But we could see a similar fight to Shakan Pitters where Hutchinson could get stopped as well. So never count out Craig Spider Richards, but I'm going to go with Willie Hutchinson in this one, surprisingly. Up next, we'll talk about Daniel Dubois versus Filip Hrgovic. So, of course, Daniel Dubois on Team Queensberry and Filip Hrgovic on Team Matchroom. Now, we saw Dubois last time out battle some demons against Gerald Miller, where he came out, had a tough first few rounds, but he came out and got the win after working pretty hard, which was one of the things a lot of people were questioning about. But he showed heart and he showed the ability to pull through, which he hadn't in the past. So that was a good confidence builder for him and a good learning experience as well, how to get through those tough moments. And Don Charles really helped him get through those tough moments as well, which he's going to need in this fight. Filip Hrgovic, on the other hand, you would never have thought that these guys would match up a few years ago because they were on completely different career trajectories. But Filip Hrgovic has kind of stagnated where he is because he's had a couple of poor performances. I mean, he had the one against Zhile Zhang, who was obviously fighting on this card. He looked pretty pedestrian in that fight. He came out of the victory, arguably. Depends what you think of that fight. I thought Zhang won the fight, but it was fairly competitive. And, well, we're going to talk about Zhang's weakness later on, which I think lost Zhang that fight in those circumstances, even though I thought he won the fight. And he had a pretty poor showing against Dempsey McKean as well, despite getting the stoppage in the final round. And, you know, and then he had that one round blowout against Mark Tamori, which you can't really look into because that's kind of all that Mark Tamori's there for. So, but that said, I think I only really see one path for this fight, and I think that path is Filip Hrgovic win. I think he is more skilled. I think Dubois has a pretty poor gas tank. And if Hrgovic can take it late, then maybe he can get a stoppage or points victory. But, you know, if he has kind of a pedestrian performance, who's to say that Dubois can't catch him and get him out of there? But I'm going to make Filip Hrgovic's favourite, and probably a moderate favourite as well. It's probably one of the easier fights to predict, I'd say, on the card. Okay. And then we are going to middleweight, and this fight is rather intriguing. Although I personally see a clear winner in this. A lot of people see this as a close fight. I think I see a clear winner in this fight, and that is Hamza Shiraz versus Ammo Williams. Hamza Shiraz on the Queensberry stable. He's actually the captain of this fight, which means he'll get more points if he wins. So Frank Warren's pretty confident in his chances in this fight, and so am I. Ammo Williams, I've seen a couple of times, but he's never really wowed me, Ammo Williams. I don't really know what other people see in him. He's entertaining. He's got some power, but he's not the most skilled. He took up boxing quite late, and you know we've seen him in some pretty pedestrian performances. The only notable performance that you could make a case for Shiraz losing this fight would be against Bradley Skeet, but ever since then he's passed every single test, and we haven't seen Emma Williams look too great against domestic, if we're being realistic, British domestic guys like Kieran Conway. So clearly, I mean personally, I see Shiraz as the winner here. The method, however, I'm not too sure. I could see him pulling out a decision. I could see him getting a barrage of shots to get stoppage. One thing I will say about Shiraz is he can be quite vulnerable, so there is a path for a Williams victory, but I definitely make Shiraz the favourite. I just think he's shown us more, and he's shown us more at kind of a better level. And when he has stepped through the levels, he's looked good in doing so. Although we can't talk much about his last fight because Liam Williams is absolutely shot now, and that was clear before the fight. But I would say I'm going to say Shiraz by late stoppage. Yeah, Hamza Shiraz by late stoppage, in my opinion. And then who have we got next? Oh yes, this fight is interesting. So the next fight is going to be for the WBA. Yeah, WBA featherweight title, and that's between Raymond Ford and Nick Ball. Obviously, Raymond Ford, Team Matchroom, Nick Ball, Team Queensberry. Both men really kind of shot onto the world scene in their last fight, really. So this is quite interesting. Two young fighters who had just shot onto the world scene. Nick Ball last time out, he had a contentious draw with Ray Vargas. Most people had him winning. Um, Ray Vargas got the lead early, and then Nick Ball kind of pulled it back, Um, but it ended up being a draw, despite Nick Ball getting two knockdowns. And that was for the WBC title. So he gets a second shot here after a decent showing last time out, and he gets it against Raymond Ford, who travelled away in his last fight, travelled to a top-ranked show to fight quite a feared puncher in Otabek Komatov, and was down in that fight, and on two judges' scorecards, and was up in the fight and won the other judges' scorecards. But even if he had gotten a single knockdown, he still would have lost that fight because two judges had him fined to 106, 103. But what does he do? He pulls out the stoppage in the final round and becomes the WBA featherweight champion in a really great fight. And he showed that he could adjust. He could make adjustments. He had some really good corner work by Coach Anthony, who I know quite well myself. Really good trainer. And this fight is, in my opinion, is the hardest fight to predict. So whatever I say here, I wouldn't be surprised if I was wrong. Personally, I can't really look past the way that Vargas was outboxing Nick Ball for the first 6 rounds. And I'm like, if Ray Ford can do that and he can sustain that, then it's going to be a very hard fight for Nick Ball to claw back again. Because Raymond Ford is fresher than Ray Vargas, and I'd argue he's a better boxer than Ray Vargas. But this is where it's interesting. We've seen Ford struggle against guys who can pressure, against guys like there was one fight he should have lost, who also fought Joe Cordina and gave him a tough fight as well, and he really struggled with kind of the pressure in that fight. And we know Nick Ball can pressure, so that's where I find this fight really hard to predict because we've seen each guy have a weakness against what the other guy brings, and those are the hardest kind of fights to predict. But still, I'm gonna say Raymond Ford via decision in this fight. But like I said, I really wouldn't be surprised if I was wrong. And then we go to probably one of the fight that people are most excited about, which is Deontay Wilder versus Zhilei Zhang. And obviously both guys are coming off the loss to Joseph Parker. I'd say Zhilei Zhang probably looked better in losing that fight, and probably only lost because of his gas tank. But like I was saying earlier, when I was talking about the Hrgovic fight, that probably lost in that fight, and it's his biggest weakness, definitely. I mean, we've seen it against Jerry Forrest as well. That was a big weakness for him. So it's really hard to predict a Zhilei Zhang fight, but it's equally as hard to predict a Deontay Wilder fight, especially after the Joseph Parker fight, because I don't think anyone expected that. But I think I see a pretty clear outcome. But you can never have clear outcomes with these kinds of fights where you've got two guys that have got clear one-punch knockout power in their punches. However, Zhang has. We're going to have a battle of the feet, orthodox versus southpaw, Zhang has immense power in two shots. Obviously, he's got that right hook, and he's got that left straight, which are both one punch knockout punches, and Wilder's got that right hand. So it's going to be battle of the straights, but Zhang has got that extra advantage in the right hook. I personally could very likely see Deontay Wilder getting chinned inside 3 rounds, because a lot of people forget how dangerous Shaylee Zhang is in the first 3 or so rounds. Look at that Jerry Torres fight. In the first 3 rounds, he dropped Jerry Forrest, and everyone in those rounds, Jerry Forrest is normally very durable. Every single one of those rounds, he dropped him. But that's the thing with Zhang. He's very strong in the first 3 rounds, but the longer it goes, the more he tires out. But nothing Wilder has shown me recently has shown me that he is able to find the target consistently with that right hand anymore. Don't get me wrong, Zhang's going to be an easier target than Joseph Parker was. Joseph Parker is a very good mover, and he can keep his cardio late. But how is Wilder going to get out of the onslaught from Shirley Zhang in the first 3 rounds? I just don't see it. And even if he does get through and take some damage and get dropped, who's going to say he's going to be in a state to be able to set up shots? He might just be buying for time. Who knows if he's in the right mindset? And that's why I'm going for Zhang Zhang by knockout. But there's always that chance that Wilder could come through the first 3 rounds somehow and not take so much damage. And when Zhang Zhang tires, he could capitalise. Who knows? But I just don't see that happening in this fight. So Zhang Zhang by knockout. And just finally, this isn't part of a 5v5 fight, but I want to talk about Bivol versus Zinad, because this was originally meant to be undisputed versus Artbetbiev, but Zinad's still a decent opponent for short notice. He fought literally just in April against a prospect who I actually rated quite a lot in Jerome Papaloni, and got the victory there. So he's fought on away soil twice. It's pretty solid over two decent prospects, some good wins, but I just see him getting outclassed for a large portion of this fight here, and I can't see past that. So it's probably going to be a Bivol decision. I hope Zinad makes a good account of himself. I expect him to. Maybe he'll even win a round or so, a round or two. But I just think Bivol's going to be too much. But I think people are underestimating him as a late notice opponent. I think he's not a bad late notice opponent, and I think he's done his job to get in the picture of contendership after getting some good wins. But it's hard to look past Bivol, so you've got to go for a points win for that. So, just to recap on my picks, obviously I've got Willie Hutchinson by points, so that's 1-0 to Queensberry. And then I've got Hamza Shiraz by points, 2-0 to Queensberry. And then I have Ray Ford by decision, which is 2-1 Queensberry. Zheli Zhang by knockout, which is 3-1 Queensberry. And then finally, what did I say? Trying to remember what the last fight is. So 3-1 currently. Oh yeah, that was the last fight. Yeah, so I have got it. 4-1 to Queensberry. I think the captain choices are interesting. I think they've chosen the captains off different ideas. I think Matchroom and Eddie Hearn have chosen Wilder to try and hype him up and to give him, bolster, knowing that he's doing it for the team instead of, yeah. So I think Eddie Hearn's doing it in the process, hyping up, and I think Frank Warren has picked his captain as Hamza Shiraz because he has the most confidence in him to win. And that's kind of the story of the 5v5, and these are my predictions, of course. Some fights are definitely harder to predict than others. You saw how much trouble I had predicting the Raymond Ford fight, but um, some of them I definitely see some quite clear winners. But then again, with all these fights, it's kind of the point where all of them could go either way. Oh yeah, that was the final fight I missed. It was Daniel Dubois versus Filip Hrgovic. So I actually had Filip Hrgovic winning that one, which means I didn't actually have it 4-1 Queensberry. I've got it 3-2 Queensberry, and therefore I personally have Queensberry winning this fight. But we have to consider whether the captains win, and I predict Queensberry's captain is going to win, Hamza Shiraz, and I predict Matchroom's captain is going to lose him, Deontay Wilder. So that's also going to play a factor on the scoring, but I don't think it's going to make a difference to the result on this card because I already have it 3-2 to Queensberry. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed these predictions, and I've got some more content planned soon. So thanks for tuning in.